All right, welcome back, guys, for another session of my The Voice of Zen. I'm going to be continuing reading Magic Bites, and I'm pretty sure I'm somewhere in the midst of chapter 2, and it is incredibly long, so I'm just going to break kind of whenever. Now, if you'd like to catch up on what I've already read, there's a previous stream for it on Twitch. You can also catch the ones that were way, way, way a long time ago on my YouTube channel, The Voice of Zen. I have a link for it on my Twitch page. I think that covers most of it. I'm planning on posting all of them on both places, so you'll be able to catch them both whenever you feel like it, eventually. In the meantime, I will start with the reading where I ended off last time, which was just after she'd met Jim and they were talking about pack business. When in doubt and in need of information, find a snitch and squeeze him. That was one of the very few investigative techniques that I was aware of. As a matter of fact, that and the annoy principles involved until the guilty party decides to kill you pretty much summed it up for me. Move over, Sherlock. I was definitely in doubt and in need of information concerning Gastyke's dead vampire, and I knew just the person to squeeze. He had spiky hair, wore black leather, and called himself Bono after some long forgotten singer. He was also Gastyke's journeyman. If you had a talent for necromancy or necronavigation, the care and piloting of the dead, you qualified as an apprentice. Once you added a bit of knowledge to that, you became a journeyman. To move higher required a genuine power and a drive to succeed. Most people never graduated from journeymanship. Bono was on his second year. His knowledge of the dead was almost encyclopedic. The last time we met, he gave me a cutout article to put on my almanac, something about some Slavic corpse-eating creature called an Upir, but I had a feeling his expertise ended with the theory. My guess was he would not grow into a master of the dead anytime soon. Bono was easy to find. He frequented Andriano's, a peaceful joint as bars went, unlike the newly redesigned establishments of Atlanta Underground, where bars leaned toward the rowdy and most clubs had the word pain in their name. Andriano's occupied a nice little spot on Euclid Avenue, in Little Five Points, and catered to an almost middle-class crowd. Bono's pretty face, his hair, and his jacket made sure he was noticed. Women enjoyed his company. He enjoyed them too, but his focus was on quantity. I'd never seen him with the same woman twice. Once in a while, someone tried to kick his ass and left a few smears of their blood on the floor and furniture. Anyone who spent his formative years tending to a stable of vampires proved a hard person to fight. I could have gone straight to the source and just asked Gastek about his vampire. Trouble was, confronting Gastek meant I'd have to physically walk into the casino, where the people had their headquarters. Walking into the casino meant I'd have to meet Nataraja, the people's grand poobah in the city and Gastek's boss and supervisor. Nataraja was the worst kind of worm, but he had an uncanny sensitivity to magic. My guess was, he wasn't quite sure what he felt when I was around, but he wanted very much to find out. Every time we met, our conversation degenerated into him trying to force me into a show of power. That I couldn't afford, especially not now, with the 4 new words of power rattling in my head. I'd have to go to the casino eventually, but for now, squeezing Gastek's journeyman would suffice. It was almost 11 p.m. when I made it to Andriano's. Bono rarely showed up before dark, and I had used the time to hop the ley line back to my place and bring back Betsy, my beat-up old Subaru. It looked like I would be stuck in the city for a while, since the magic would fall the way it always did. I'd eventually need a car that worked during tech. It cost me $50 to have Betsy towed to Greg's place. I was in the wrong business. I entered Andriano's. The bar stretched the length of the room, guarded by a row of tall stools. A couple of patrons stared into their drinks on the far end. A blonde, with her war paint on, sipped something fruity from a margarita glass. Through the arched doorway, I could see the second room crowded with red privacy booths, which Andriano must have pilfered from some fast food joint. The barkeep, long of limb and dark haired, nodded at me. Lean and phlegmatic, with a narrow, intelligent face, he looked more like a campus intellectual than a bartender. His name was Sergio, and he knew how big of a lime slice to put into a Corona, which made him a worthwhile man to know. I passed him 2 20s. Sergio bent an eyebrow at me. What for? In case anything gets broken, Bono and I are going to chat a bit. Is he here? Sergio nodded towards the room with booths and shrugged, palming the 20s. Stay away from the windows, he said. Too expensive for you. The back room was dimly lit with fey lanterns. Bono preferred a corner booth, the furthest from the door. I stood for a moment, surveying the scene, and caught sight of his spiky black hair. I marched towards the booth, with flags out and guns ready. Bono had company. Judging by the mystical "Hey baby, I'm a student of magic" smile that stretched his lips, he had female company. No matter. He paused his wooing to glance around the room and noticed me. He must have seen something he did not like, because the smile slid right off his face. He sat straighter. I reached back. My fingers grasped Slayer's hilt and withdrew it in a smooth, fluid motion. Bono's hand dropped under the table, groping for a gun. He carried a 9mm Colt in his jacket pocket. And I scrolled too far. I crashed to a halt before the booth. A thin redhead in a strapless short dress sat opposite Bono. I put my saber on the table. Bono stank of vampires, and the saber fluoresced weakly, a sliver of moonlight against the dark wood. The redhead's eyes went wide. Bono's face relaxed a bit, but his gaze never left mine. Hey, Bono, I said. Nice to see you. Fuck any corpses lately? The last hope for a relaxing evening bled from his face. Not any that you'd care about. The redhead scrambled out of the booth and fled, trying to salvage some shred of dignity. Bono threw a wistful look after her retreating backside and turned to me. You scared her. Not nice, Kate. I raised an eyebrow at him and slid in the seat vacated by the redhead. Did you read the article I gave you? He asked. No. You should read it, Kate. You should really read about the Upiri. I traced Slayer's blade with my finger. It stung a little as the magic discharge touched my skin. I want to know about the diviner's death. I want to know why one of Gastek's bloodsuckers was at the scene. I want to know who was piloting it and what they saw. I want to know what tore his head off, and whatever else you'll find necessary to add. Bono showed me his teeth. Feeling a bit on edge today, are you? My hand closed about the hilt. You have no idea. He leaned back. Go ahead, he said. Make a play. I'll ass fuck you with that saber. I grinned at him. You can't take me, Bono. Go ahead and try. You telegraph your punches, you drop your left shoulder, and your gun isn't worth piss with magic up. So come on, show me what you got. I saw his eyes and knew my grin had turned into a hungry grimace. I really need to hurt something. It'll make me feel good. I was almost laughing, having a hard time containing myself. Give me a reason. Come on, Bono. Just give me a fucking reason. Magic built around me, drawn from the environment by the emanations from my blood. If magic had color, I would be sitting in a whirlpool of red. Slayer flared bright silver, feeding off my anger. It wanted to slice into warm flesh, and I was about to let it. Bono blinked. He sensed the magic influx and sucked the air into his lungs in a sharp breath. You're crazy. Very. His face went slack, and I knew he had stepped away from the cliff. The fight would not happen today. Bono leaned forward. What if I told you that we have no involvement with the diviner's death, and even if we did, we don't have to speak to you? That proverbial we. I chewed on it for a little while and said, in that case, I'll get up and walk over to the bar, where I will make 2 phone calls. First, I'll call the night protector, for whom I now work, and tell him that a vampire belonging to Gastek was involved in his diviner's murder. I'll tell him that an effort was made to conceal its brand, which is illegal, and that Gastek's journeyman declined to discuss the matter with me and threatened my life. Then I'll call Gastek and inform him that I know the reason why the world is starting to crash down around his ears, and I'll explain to him that the reason is you. He stared at me. I thought we were on good terms. We nod to each other across the room. We don't bother each other. I shared my research with you. I shrugged. You won't do this to me, he said with great surety. You know what Gaztec would do to me. And you're a nice person. Just what exactly in my track record gives you the idea that I am a nice person? He had no answer and shook his head. Why me? Why not? Give me what I want and I'll go away, or I'll hurt you one way or another. Bono was in the corner. No way to go out but outside the ring. They're called shadows, he said, his handsome face marked with resignation. Vampires with concealed brands. Gastek isn't the only one using them, but he uses his a lot, if you catch my drift. What was this particular one doing? Tailing the diviner, but I'm not sure why. Who was piloting it? Bono hesitated. Merkowitz? What did he see? Bono spread his hands. Your guess is as good as mine. Do you know what happens to a navigator when the vamp he's piloting dies? I had a general idea, but more info never hurt. Enlighten me. Unless you guard yourself, you'll suffer death shock, meaning you think it's your head that's being torn off, which leaves your brain very confused. Add to it the explosion of shit the diviner threw around and whatever magic the attacker emitted, and you'll get Merkowitz. I never liked that asshole. I have to admit, he makes a fine vegetable. My heart sank. Non-responsive? About as responsive as a brick wall. How long will he be like this? They're working on him now, but when he'll come out, nobody knows. It's hard work convincing someone that he isn't dead when his own mind has decided otherwise. Do the people have any idea who might have enough juice to beat a diviner and a vampire to a pulp? Bono looked past me at the wall. I need a name, I said. Corwin. You didn't hear it from me. He rose in a fluid motion and left. I waited a few moments, went to the bar, and drank a cold Corona with a wedge of lime in it. I had frightened Bono. A small part of me, felt bad about it. The larger part reminded me that he piloted vampires for a living and kicked his opponents when they decided to stay down. Greg's face came into my mind. I took a big swig of the Corona. I felt defeated and tired. What a long day. I'd hoped for more than Bono had given me. Still, I had a name. And I had Greg's database, against which I could reference it. The day was not a total waste. Darkness cloaked the stairway of Greg's apartment building. Not a single lamp illuminated the concrete steps. When I came to the first landing, I saw why. The electric bulbs had exploded. It happened once in a while during a hard fluctuation in places where the magic hit the strongest. The fluorescent fey lamps usually did the job just fine. They ran by converting environmental magic to weak bluish light, but tonight they were dark too. The fluctuation must have been too strong, and the lamp converters had overheated and burnt out. I felt odd going back to Greg's place. Not exactly ill at ease, but not happy to be there either. Unfortunately, I had no choice. I would have to spend some time in this rotten city, and I needed a base. Greg's apartment was actually perfect. Its wards were keyed to me, and Greg had maintained a fair collection of basic herbs, reference books, and other useful things. His arsenal was decent, but he leaned towards bludgeoning arms, while I preferred swords. Maces and hammers required far too much strength. I was strong for a woman, but I harbored no illusions. In a contest of strength with a man my size and my training, he would still pummel me into the ground. Luckily for me, very few men had my training. I climbed the dark stairs, fantasizing about food and a shower. The ward guarding the apartment door clutched at my hand and opened in a pulse of blue. I entered, kicked off my shoes, and went into the kitchen. The upside of having a magic sword was that its secretions liquefied the undead flesh. On the downside, the blade had to be fed at least once a month or it would become too brittle and break. I slid a 4-foot-long fish tank from the bottom cabinet and found the bag of feed I'd kept at Greg's apartment for emergency purposes. Grayish brown, the feed resembled coarse wheat flour. Most of it actually was wheat flour, that and metal shavings, copper, iron, and silver, and seashells ground to fine dust, together with bone meal and chalk. I filled the tank with water, added a cup of feed, and stirred the mixture with a long wooden apron, or wooden spoon, until the solution became cloudy, and none of the feed remained stuck to the bottom. That done, I dropped the saber into it and washed my hands. The little ruby light on the answering machine was blinking. It shouldn't have, since the magic was in full swing. Magic was a funny thing. Sometimes phones worked and sometimes they failed. I settled into my chair and pushed the button on the answering machine. Anna's anxiety-laced voice filled the room. Kate, it's me. I sat up straighter. Anna didn't get anxious. Perhaps it was Greg's death. Their divorce was 10 years old, but still, she must have felt something for him. Listen very carefully while I remember. Exhaustion crept into her voice, and I realized she was fresh from a vision. The fact that she knew I would be in Greg's apartment was so mundane to her she didn't bother to comment on it. Sometimes being a clairvoyant had its uses. Woods, Anna's voice said. Very green, very healthy, late spring or early summer. The air smells of moisture. There are tall wooden idols set under some of the trees. They're old. Time has smoothed the edges of the carvings. The idols shift and change shapes. One looks like an old man, but also a bear with horns, holding something. A saucer of water, maybe? Another old man stands on a fish. I think he holds a wheel in his hand. A man with three faces, his eyes covered, sitting deep in the shadow. I can barely see him. The first was Valles. The third was Triglav. Slavic pantheon. I'd have to look up the second one. A man stands before them, surrounded by a brood of his children. They are very wrong. They do not fit, neither human nor animal, neither living nor dead. Behind him stand his servants. They smell of undeath. Anna took a deep breath. The man is masturbating. To the right, something is shimmering in and out of existence. A child, maybe? To the left, you're sitting cross-legged on the grass and eating a corpse. Lovely. I know Greg's dead, she said, and I know you're looking for the murderer. You must drop it, Kate. I know you'll ignore me, but I have to warn you. This is not good, Kate. It's not good at all. Oh, look at that. We hit chapter 3. Yay! Chapter 3. I awoke 8 hours later, tired and plagued by a migraine. I had meant to call Anna, but instead I somehow had fallen into bed and my body turned off my brain for the entire night. The phone no longer worked. I sat on the bed and stared at it. So far, I had some data for a hair, but not the actual specimen. I had some lines that may or may not be the result of an M-reader malfunction, and I had the name of some nocturnal character given to me under duress by a people's journeyman, who'd pretty much do anything to get me off his back. On top of it, I had what was probably a feline hair on a dead vampire, which set the pack and people on a collision course. I pictured two colossi running at each other across the city like monstrosities from an antique horror movie, and myself a gnat in the middle. It would be a bloodbath, which most of the city wouldn't survive. So the trick wasn't to survive it, but to keep it from happening. In my daydream, the gnat kicked one colossus in the groin and hit the other with a vicious uppercut. Uppercut, even. I tried the phone again. It still didn't work. I cursed and went to dress. An hour later, I'd slipped into Greg's office. Nobody challenged me. Nobody glared and asked why the hell the case was not solved or why I was so late arriving. The lack of drama was actually very disappointing. I sifted through Greg's data. The cabinets contained no files marked Corwin, but in the last cabinet I'd found a stack of folders marked with a question mark, so I went through them on the faint hope that I'd find something, anything. Otherwise, I'd be reduced to grabbing people on the street and screaming, "Do you know Corwin? Where is he?" I should probably keep from doing that because I lost my page. There we are. The files secured Greg's notes, written in his particular code. I frowned as I scanned one indecipherable entry after another. Glop, AG, BLL-7. BLL had to be bullets. AG could be argentium, silver. What the hell did glop mean? My hopes dimmed as I flipped through page after page, and when I came across it, my brain almost did not register it. On a single page, there was a scratchy Corwin, and next to it were two drawings. One was a very clumsy rendition of a glove with sharp blades protruding from its knuckles. The other was some sort of bizarre doodle against a dark semicircle. I stared at the doodle. It meant nothing to me. The phone rang. I looked at it. It rang again. I wondered if I should answer. The intercom came to life, and Maxine's voice said, "You should, dear. It's for you." How did she know? I picked up the phone. Yes? "Hello, sunshine," said Jim's voice. "I'm kinda busy." I turned the file on its side and examined the doodle. Still nothing. "No shit," he said. "Yeah, no gigs for me." "That's not why I'm calling." I frowned at the phone and turned the file upside down. "I'm all ears." "Someone wants to meet you," he said. "Tell him to get in line," I mumbled. The doodle almost looked like something. "I'm not joking." "You never joke, because you're too damn busy proving that you're a badass. Come on. Black leather cloak in mid-spring Atlanta? Besides, I don't have time to meet anybody." Jim's dropped low. Jim's voice dropped low, and he spoke each word very distinctly. "Think very carefully. Do you really want me to tell the man no?" Something about the way he said "the man" stopped me. I sat still and thought very hard about what kind of man would inspire Jim to use that voice. "What did I do to warrant the Beast Lord's attention?" I asked dryly. "You're sitting in the diviner's office, aren't you?" "Touché." The Beast Lord was the Pack King, the lord of the Shape Changers, and he ruled his brethren with an iron fist. Few ever saw him, and the mention of his title was enough to make the loudest Shape Changers shut up. In other words, he was precisely the kind of fellow my father and Greg had warned me to avoid. I ground my teeth, thinking of a way to weasel out of it. I would have to go and see the people sooner or later to find out about the vampire, but so far nothing necessitated my walking into the Pack's lair. "Your safety's guaranteed," Jim said, "and I'll be there." "That's not the reason," I murmured. There had to be a way to dodge this invitation. I glared at the stubborn doodle. "Look," Jim said, making an obvious attempt to sound reasonable. "Consider the—" "Tell him I'll meet him tonight, someplace private," I said. "I'll answer his questions if he answers mine." "Agreed. 11 o'clock, corner of Unicorn and 13th." He hung up. I tapped the desk with my fingers. Yes, fingers, that's right. Fingers? I finally made sense of the doodle. The head of a howling wolf silhouetted against the semicircle of the moon. The sign of the Pack. Corwin belonged to the Pack. There was a small matter of Maxine to attend to. I concentrated and whispered so quietly I couldn't hear myself. True communicators could focus enough to broadcast their thoughts without vocalization, but I still had to move my lips like a doofus. "Maxine?" "Yes, dear," Maxine's voice said in my head. "Were there any other calls for me?" "No." "Thank you." "You're welcome." I put the file back into its place and walked out of the office. Maxine was a telepath, a strong one. From now on, there would be no thinking done in the office. I left quickly, almost breaking into a run on the stairs. The idea of someone digging into my head took some getting used to. I went back to the apartment and sat on the floor, leaned against the door, and took a deep breath. All my life I was taught to stay out of the way of the powerful. Don't draw attention to yourself. Don't show off. Guard your blood because it will betray you. If you bleed, wipe it clean and burn the rag. Burn the bandages. If someone manages to obtain some of your blood, kill him and destroy the sample. At first, it was a matter of survival. Later, it became a matter of vengeance. Meeting the Beast Lord meant plunging head first into supernatural politics of Atlanta. He was one of the heavyweights. I could choose not to meet the Beast Lord. All I had to do was walk away. It would be so easy. A vision of me squatting over a human corpse, stuffing shreds of limp meat into my mouth, flashed before my eyes. The apartment was silent. It felt like Greg. It was suffused with his life force, with everything that made him what he was. He was like my father, direct, unbending, doing his own thing and never worrying about how the world would look upon him. I couldn't let it go. I would find whoever killed him and punish them. If not for Greg, then for me. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to look myself in the eye. When life backs you into a corner and offers you no escape, when your friends, your lover, and your family abandon you, when you're at the end of your rope, panicked, alone, and losing your mind, and you know you'd give anything to make your problems go away, then, desperate and eager, you will come to Unicorn Lane, seeking salvation in its magics and secrets. You'll do anything, pay any price. Unicorn Lane will take you in, shroud you in its power, fix your problems, and then exact its price. Then you will learn what anything really means. Every city has one of those neighborhoods, dangerous, sinister places, so treacherous that even the animals or criminals who prey on other criminals shun them. Unicorn Lane was such a place. 30 city blocks long and 8 blocks deep, it cut through what used to be Midtown like a dagger. Half-crumbled skyscrapers stood there, mute witness to the past technology, the husks of GLG Grand, Promenade 2, and One Atlantic Center, gnawed down to the bones by magic. Rubble choked the streets, and sewage overflowed from the busted pipes in foul-smelling streams. Magic pooled there, lingering even in the strongest of tech waves, and hideous things that shun the light found refuge there, among the dark carcasses of gutted high-rises. Lunatic mages, vicious, perverted loops, who feared a death at the hand of unforgiving pack, Satanists, and rogue necromancers, all ran to Unicorn. For if they could make it there and survive, no lawman on this earth would be able to force them out. Unicorn Lane held on to its own. Hell of a place for a rendezvous. I drove up 14th Street, parked Carmelian in a secluded alley, and walked the 2 remaining city blocks. Ahead, a stone wall had crumbled, a pitiful attempt of some fool in the city council to contain Unicorn Lane. I climbed over the wreckage. A large block of concrete barred my way. It looked slick, almost slimy, and I leapt over that. Here, even the moonlight snapped and growled like a rabid dog, and magic bit without warning. 5 minutes into the Unicorn, a sign on the side of an abandoned house announced that I had reached my destination, corner of 13th and Unicorn. In front of me, an old apartment complex stared at the street with empty windows. To the right, a tangled mess of concrete and steel framework marked a collapsed office building. The debris blocked the street, burying the pavement beneath the rubble. The street was open on the left, but shrouded in darkness. I stood very still, waiting, listening. The moonlight spilled onto the ruins. Thick, inky darkness pooled in the alcoves and burrows and stretched forth, mingling with light, spawning half-shadows and blurring the lines between real and illusory. The eerie landscape appeared false, as if the ruined buildings had vanished, leaving behind treacherous shadows of their former selves. Ahead in the depths of Unicorn Lane, something howled, giving voice to a tortured soul. My heart skipped a beat. Wow, webcam, way to just fail. Whatever, I'll deal with that later. Someone or something watched me from the darkness. I felt their stare press upon me like a physical burden. Moments dragged by, with minutes in tow. After a while, I glanced at my watch. It had stopped. Somewhere in the darkness, the Beast Lord prowled. I didn't know what he looked like. I didn't know the species of his beast. Few people outside the pack claimed to have met him, and nobody seemed willing to discuss the experience. The only thing certain about him was power. By the latest count, he commanded a force of 337 shape-changers in Atlanta alone. He wasn't in charge because he was the smartest or the most popular. He ruled because of those 337 he was unquestionably the strongest of. He was in charge by the right of might. That is, he'd yet to meet anyone who could kick his ass. Among the shape-changers, wolves were the most numerous. Then came the foxes, the jackals, the rats, and then the hyenas and the smaller felines, lynxes, bobcats, and cheetahs. There were the exotic forms, too, the were-buffaloes and were-serpents, but the buffaloes formed their own herd in the Midwest, and the serpents were solitary. All of the beast forms were larger than their natural counterparts. An average shape changer in wolf form came close to 220 pounds, while the natural gray wolf weighed 100 pounds less. From a biological point of view, the transformation of a 170-pound human into a 220-pound animal made no sense, but when it came to shape-shifting, the fluctuating mass was the least of anomalies. Magic could not be measured and explained in scientific terms, for magic grew through destroying the very natural principles that made science as people knew it possible. Another howl ruptured the quiet, still too far away to be a threat. The Beast Lord, the leader, the alpha male, had to enforce his position as much by will as by physical force. He would have to answer any challenges to his rule, so it was unlikely that he turned into a wolf. A wolf would have little chance against a cat. Wolves hunted in a pack, bleeding their victim and running them into exhaustion, while cats were solitary killing machines, designed to murder swiftly and with deadly precision. No, the Beast Lord would have to be a cat, a jaguar, or a leopard, perhaps a tiger, although all known cases of were-tigers occurred in Asia and could be counted without involving toes. I'd heard a rumor of the Kodiak of Atlanta, a legend of an enormous battle-scarred bear roaming the streets in search of pack animals. The pack, like any social organization, had its lawbreakers. The Kodiak was their executioner. Perhaps His Majesty turned into a bear. Damn. I should have brought some honey. My left leg was tiring. I shifted from foot to foot. A low, warning growl froze me in mid-move. It came from the dark, gaping hole in the building across the street and rolled throughout the ruins, awakening ancient memories of a time when humans were pathetic. Hairless creatures cowering by the weak flame of the first fire and scanning the night with frightened eyes, for it held monstrous, hungry killers. My subconscious screamed in panic. I held it in check and cracked my neck slowly, one side and then the other. A lean shadow flickered in the corner of my eye. On the left, and above me, a graceful jaguar stretched on the jutting block of concrete, an elegant statue encased in the liquid metal of night. Homo panthera onca, the killer who takes its prey in a single bound. Well, hello, Jim. The jaguar looked at me with amber eyes, feline lips stretched in a startlingly human smirk. He could laugh if he wanted. He didn't know what was at stake. Jim turned his head and began washing his paw. My saber firmly in hand, I marched across the street and stepped through the opening. The darkness swallowed me whole. The lingering musky scent of a cat hit me. So, not a bear after all. Where was he? I scanned the building. Peering into the gloom, moonlight filtered through the gaps in the walls, creating a mirage of twilight and complete darkness. I knew he was watching me, enjoying himself. Diplomacy was never my strong suit, and my patience had run dry. I guess that answers that one. Nope. All right. Nope. Yeah, there we go. OBS trying to jump in the middle and wreck my camera. All right, so I knew he was watching me, enjoying himself. Diplomacy was never my strong suit, and my patience had run dry. I crouched and called out, "Here, kitty, kitty, kitty." Two golden eyes ignited at the opposite wall. A shape stirred within the darkness and rose, carrying the eyes up and up and up until they towered above me. A single enormous paw moved through the moonlight, disturbing the dust on the filthy floor. Wicked claws shot forth and withdrew. A massive shoulder followed, its gray fur marked by faint, smoky stripes. The huge body shifted forward, coming at me, and I lost my balance and fell on my ass into the dirt. Dear God, this wasn't just a lion. This thing had to be at least 5 feet at the shoulder, and why was it striped? The colossal cat circled me, half in the light, half in the shadow, the dark mane trembling as he moved. I scrambled to my feet and almost bumped into the gray muzzle. We looked at each other, the lion and I, our gazes level. Then I twisted around and began dusting off my jeans in a most undignified manner. The lion vanished into a dark corner. A whisper of power pulsed through the room, tugging at my senses. If I did not know better, I would say that he'd just changed. Kitty kitty? Asked a level male voice. I jumped. No shape changer went from a beast into a human without a nap. In a mid-form, yes, but Beastman had trouble talking. Yeah, I said. You've caught me unprepared. Next time I'll bring cream and catnip toys. If there is a next time. I turned, and there he stood, wearing a loose t-shirt and sweatpants. A modest shape changer, how refreshing. You wouldn't even know that he'd changed, save for the glistening sheen of dampness on his skin. He looked me over slowly, judging, taking my measure. I could blush demurely, or I could do the same to him. I chose not to blush. A couple of inches taller than me, the Beast Lord gave an impression of coiled power. Easy, balanced stance. Blonde hair, cut too short to grab. At first glance, he looked to be in his early to mid-20s, but his build betrayed him. His shoulders strained his t-shirt, his back was broad and corded with muscle, showing the power and strength of a man developed into his early 30s. What kind of a woman greets the Beast Lord with, "Here, kitty kitty," he asked. One of a kind, I murmured the obvious reply. Eventually, I had to look him in the eye. Better sooner than later. The Beast Lord had a strong, square jaw. His nose was narrow, with a misshapen bridge, as though it had been broken more than once and hadn't healed right. Considering the regenerative powers of the shape changers, someone must have pounded his face with a sledgehammer. Our stares met. Little golden sparks danced in his gray eyes. His gaze made me want to bow my head and look away. He regarded me as if I was an interesting new snack. "I'm the Lord of the Free Beasts," he said. I figured. Perhaps he expected me to curtsy. He leaned forward a little, puzzling over me as if I were an odd-looking insect. Why would a Knight Protector hire a no-name merc to investigate the death of his diviner? I gave him my best cryptic smile. He grimaced. "What have you found out?" he asked. "I'm not at liberty to tell you that, not with the pack suspect." He leaned forward more, letting the moonlight fall on his face. His gaze was direct and difficult to hold. Our stares locked, and I gritted my teeth. 5 seconds into the conversation, and he was already giving me the alpha stare. If he started clicking his teeth, I'd have made a run for it, or I'd possibly introduce him to my sword. "You will tell me what you know now," he said. "Or?" He said nothing, so I elaborated. "See, this kind of threat usually has an or attached to it, or an and. Tell me, and I'll allow you to live, or something like that." His eyes ignited with gold. His gaze was unbearable now. "I can make you beg to tell me everything you know," he said, and his voice was a low growl. It sent icy fingers of terror down my spine. I gripped Slayer's hilt until it hurt. The golden eyes were burning into my soul. "I don't know," I heard my own voice say. "You look kind of out of shape to me. How long has it been since you took care of your own dirty work?" His right hand twitched. Muscles boiled under the taut skin, and fur burst, sheathing the arm. Claws slid from thickened fingers. My hand snapped inhumanly fast. Oh, his hand snapped inhumanly fast. I weaved back, and it fanned my face, leaving no scars. A strand of hair fell onto my left cheek, severed from my braid. The claws retracted. "I think I still remember how," he said. A spark of magic ran from my fingers into Slayer's hilt and burst into the blade, coating the smooth metal in a milky white glow. Not that the glow actually did anything useful, but it looked bloody impressive. "Any time you want to dance," I said. He smiled, slow and lazy, not laughing anymore. "Little girl." He was impressive. I give him that. I turned the blade, warming up my wrist. The saber drew a tightly glowing ellipse in the air, flinging tiny drops of luminescence on the dirty floor. One of them fell close to the Beast Lord's foot, and he moved away. "I wonder if all this changing has made you sluggish." Bring your pig sticker and we'll find out. We circled each other, our feet raising light clouds of dust from the dirty floor. I wanted to fight him, if only to see if I could hold my own. His lips parted, releasing a snarl. I swung my blade, judging the distance between us. If we fought, and if I survived, I'd never find out who killed Greg. The pack would tear me to shreds. This wasn't really getting me anywhere. I had no choice but to lose face. I stopped and lowered my blade. The words didn't want to leave my mouth, but I forced them out anyway. I'm sorry. I'd love to play, but I'm not my own person at the moment. He smiled. I did my best to ignore the condensation I saw in his face. My name is Kate Daniels. Greg Fieldman was my legal guardian and the closest thing to family I've ever had. I want to find the scum who killed him. I can't afford to fight you, and I won't show off my magic. I just want to know if the pack had something to do with Greg's death. Once I find the killer, I would be more than happy to indulge you. I offered him my hand. He halted, studying me, and then the fur melted away, absorbed through the follicles that produced it. The Beast Lord took my hand in his human palm and shook. Fair enough. Right now, I'm not my own person either, he said. Being a Beast Lord, he probably never was. The gold in his irises shrank to mere flecks. His control was unbelievable. The most adept of shape changers could choose between three forms, human, animal, and beastman. To change a part of your body into one form while keeping the rest of it in another, as he had, was incredible. Before this night, I would have said impossible. The Beast Lord sat down on the dirty floor. I had no choice but to follow, feeling like an idiot for dusting my jeans off earlier. If I prove to you that the pack had no interest in removing the diviner, will you share? Yes. He reached into his sweatshirt, produced a black leather folder zipped shut, and offered it to me. I held my hand out, but he retracted it before my fingers touched the supple leather. I wondered if he was quicker than me. It would be interesting to find out. Between us, he said. Understood. I took the folder and unzipped it. Inside were photos, shots of corpses, some human, some partially animal, mangled and bloody. The bright, awful crimson dominated the images, making it difficult to analyze them. I looked over the photographs anyway. Corpse after corpse after corpse, torn, disemboweled, drenched in their blood. It made me ill. 7, I murmured, holding the pictures by their edges as if the blood on them would stain my fingers. Yours? Every one. He reached over to tap one of the shots. This one, Zachary Stone, the alpha rat, tough, vicious son of a bitch. I tried to see beyond the blood, focusing on the injuries. Something chewed on him. Something chewed on 5 of them, and would have chewed on the other 2 as well, if it wasn't scared away. A little light went off in my head. Greg was working on this. Yes, and keeping it quiet. The people want power. They lust after it the same way their vampires lust after blood. They see us as rivals, and they'll attack any weakness. To admit that they can't take care of their own is a weakness. Not a Raja would cream his jeans if he knew. You think they're responsible? I don't know, he said, his face grim. But I'm going to find out. It made sense. The Order had little love for the Pack, which was too organized and dangerous for their liking. But faced with a choice between the people and the shapeshifters, the Order would side with the Pack. Greg could have been tailing a vampire when something killed him, preventing him from revealing what he saw or was about to see. The vampire could have been caught in a struggle, or the vampire could have been following Greg when something killed him because he was getting too close, or... I would like to speak to Corwin, I said. His face showed no reaction. Is he a suspect? Suspect. There was no point in lying. Yes. Done, he said. You'll have your talk. On our premises. That's fine. I did my part, he said. I took the M scan I stole from the morgue and spread it in the dirt. What am I looking for? He asked. These, I said, pointing to the yellow lines. Looks like a scanner malfunction. I don't think so. He frowned. What would register yellow? I don't know, but I know an expert who might. You have something more to go on besides that? There was the hair, and I considered not telling him about it. Forewarned is forearmed. and he didn't give me anything that I couldn't have gotten from the Night Protector. Theoretically, still, the Beast Lord saved me a lot of work, and I doubted the texture of Corwin's hair could be altered so severely that DNA mapping would not match it to the sample. The Beast Lord looked at the photographs, shifting through them with marked slowness. He looked almost human. I realized that I was biased against Nataraja and his college of death devotees with their clinical indifference to tragedy and murder. For them, a dispatched vampire and a comatose journeyman equaled a loss of an investment, costly and inconvenient, but ultimately not emotionally painful. The man in front of me, on the other hand, had lost friends. They were people he knew well, and they had placed themselves in his charge. The pack leader's ultimate duty was to protect his pack, and he'd failed them. As he looked at the snapshots of their deaths, his face reflected determination and anger, cold, crystallized anger, born of both guilt and grief. There was an old word for that kind of anger: wrath. This I understood. I felt it every time I thought of Greg. I'd have to be very careful from now on, because I was no longer neutral. If the Beast Lord did kill Greg, I would have to work harder to convince myself of his guilt. To think that I had found a kindred spirit in the Beast Lord. How touching. Greg's death was making me lose my mind. Perhaps I could hack off the murderer's head while the Beast Lord held him down. Several hairs were found at the scene, I said. The medical examiner's office doesn't know what to make of them. They contain fragments of both human and feline genetic sequences. It's not any kind of shape changer that the ME's analysis have seen. It's weird as hell, and no, I don't have the exact printout of the base pairs. Does Nataraja know? I think he does, I said. One of the journeymen gave me Corwin's name. He didn't say they thought he did it, but it was obvious they do. A small muscle twitched in the Beast Lord's cheek, as if his face wanted to twist into a feral snarl. Figures. Are you satisfied? I asked. He nodded. For now. I'll call on you. I won't come here again, I said. Unicorn Lane makes my skin crawl. His eyes shone again. Really? I find it relaxing. A scenic location. Moonlight. I never was much for scenic locations. Next time I'd like an official invitation. He put away the snapshots. Can I keep those? I asked. He shook his head. No. It's enough that they exist. I turned to leave and paused before the gap in the ruined wall. One last thing, Your Majesty. I'd like a name I can put into my report. Something shorter than typing out the leader of the South Shape Changer faction. What should I call you? Lord. I rolled my eyes. He shrugged. It's short. This was turning out to be a difficult night, and it showed no signs of being over. I climbed out, over the heap of rubble. Jim was gone. Something touched my shoulder. I whirled and saw the Lord of Beasts looking at me from the gap 10 feet away. Kuran, he said, as if granting me a boon. You can call me Kuran. He melted into the darkness. I waited for a moment to make sure he was gone. Nobody jumped me from the shadows. Beyond the unicorn, I could see the blue Fey lanterns of the city. Time to take the M-scan to my expert. He rarely minded late-night visits. And I think that's a pretty good place to end that, since it's sort of the next mini chapter. Thanks for watching. Feel free to show up again next week, as I will attempt to do this every week, at least for a while, at 10 p.m. on Sunday. Thanks a lot for support, and I will talk to you guys later. Have a good one. Night.